Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for joining today. We are on the SAE, and don't be too harsh over the fact that the passenger train is running backwards. I'll be honest, when I've got it in single player and I'm just trying to crunch away at all the freight deliveries, I let these guys run backwards, kind of like a shuttle service. So we're going to pretend that there's a control cab back there in the observation car. But I wanted to take some time actually to discuss the timetable, and not to tell you really how it works necessarily, because the developer Adam, his video actually did a reasonably fine job of doing just that. But really I wanted to talk about what I've learned a bit about the whole system, and kind of some of the nuances and the little perks and tricks, and kind of some ideas I have for how they might be able to fix one of the key glaring issues that kills a really cool idea that I have, and as do many others. But it's all good, so let's jump right into it. So this is our timetable on the SAE. We've essentially got all of our trains in roughly 3-hour blocks. The one reason that these are 5 minutes after is because I do mostly multiplayer here, so this gives me a few minutes to, once the day starts at 6, you've got a chance for your passengers to load up and everything. It gives me a few minutes to kind of get it all settled at 6 a.m. So that I don't have to have that all done the day before. But anyways, you see, 6 to 8:20, and then it'll run again at 9, 11:21. So I just run one each direction right now. But during the peak times, this is something really great about the timetable. It does really draw in a lot more passengers. Now you could argue, and I'm sure someone would, you could argue that the passengers that are being drawn in, maybe they're not actually more daily passengers than what you might normally get, but just the fact that they're concentrating now makes it appear like you're getting more passengers. And that's probably, or possibly rather, true. Maybe they're not actually getting extra passengers that wouldn't have generated, if you didn't use a timetable. Maybe it is just the fact that you're not getting passengers at 1 in the morning anymore. Don't know. I haven't looked at the code, and I'm not going to. But the point is, because you're concentrating passengers, you are certainly getting more passengers when you run your trains. And this is what I love about the timetable. During the peak time, so this 6 to 8:20, and really even you could argue kind of the 9 to 11:20 time, at least for the first chunk, where I'm always leaving passengers behind in the station. And as a single player person, that can be a bit stressful, because that means I need to add a whole nother passenger set. I've got to manage the CTC board, manage the waypoints, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars a day. I mean, look at this. One passenger train, one going each way. So 2 sets, 8 cars each day made me $43,000. And that's just running these 5 trains right here. That is not a lot of work for that amount of money. It's nowhere near the amount of work I put in for this stuff to get those, those freight payouts, right? Now I know that they obviously work together. You get more passengers when you have more freight, and yeah, that's fine. I'm not here to talk about that. But man, this is beautiful, and I love this. Where was I going with all that? Shoot, I don't even remember. Oh yeah. So, but on an operational level, something that is so cool is the fact that at these peak times, here, and then again, I think it's this one is maybe this one when I run it. One of these two, I can't remember. I need to run a second train actually. So you have the option of, you can just create a second timetable train like 10 minutes later. Sure, just make your timetable go all the way across the screen. Why don't you? That's perfectly fine. Or you can do like something I'm considering, and that's using the class lights. So we'll have like a second section of a timetable train that leaves right after it. So it's not going to be on the timetable, but it leaves, 5 minutes after, 10 minutes after, whatever, and it's just a second section. So first section, second section. I like that idea. And it gives you that really cool flexibility, and that happens because the passengers are being concentrated at particular times, and I just love it. But one thing I've learned when setting up the timetable, set it up for like the AE, give yourself a couple minutes. So like when you're building the timetable, as Adam showed in this video, it gives you a recommendation for how much time it takes to get to the next station. I always give it like 2 extra minutes. And that's obviously because I do multiplayer. People may not always make the timetable. They may be a little bit slower. It also gives me a bit of grace if I get behind. I have a chance to catch up, over time. But you want your trains to be on time. And if you give the auto engineer 2 to 3 minutes for every station stop that he has to make, your passenger train's gonna pretty much always be on time, as long as you personally don't get in the way. And payout's great at that point when you're on time, and I personally love it. But I wanted to run an express, so like this train in the middle of the day, there's not as many people, so I wanted to run an express. So I only hit like the big stations: Silva, Dillsboro, let's see, Whittier, Bryson, Almond, Andrews. Like I just hit those, right? And Alarga Junction 2 for the transfer. So it only went to those stations. But what it was doing was ooh, that's loud. Sorry, I had to cross the road there in Wilmette. The thing was, since it's not making station stops at the small stations, it was picking up passengers that wanted to go to those stations. Like, I don't know, right here in Wilmette, for example. What it was doing was a train would leave Silva, it would go to Andrews, it would pick up passengers at any of these stations that want to go to Wilmette. So they would ride the train all the way to Andrews, knowing that they can get on the 3 o'clock train in Andrews that does actually go to Wilmette. So they're getting on my train. Let's say they get on in Silva, because this really happened. They get on my train at 12 because they want to go to Wilmette. Well, they're not going to actually make it to Wilmette until 5. Well, that's five hours. They only stay on for 4 because of that new rule they have to force you to deliver passengers, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So what was happening was, when you do an express and you're skipping stations, passengers still get on your train who want to go to those stations, but they don't have a way to get to them. And so they end up taking up a seat. You leave a bunch of passengers in the station that you could have got paid for, and they end up thinking that they're going to make it by this time, but they don't, because it exceeds the 4-hour rule. And so you lose money. Not just lose money on them because you don't deliver them. You lose money on all the people you could have delivered between the stations because you're skipping a few, because these people were taking up seats. And it just was a killer. So I ended up getting rid of the express idea until they, address that issue. So, and I know they mentioned it. There are some perks to it. It's all about the transfers, and the transfer system is a great system. Personally, I like it. A passenger will transfer one time. I love that. I think that's a great system. I think it needs a little more optimization, so that you're not getting killed with the whole express idea, only being full of people that are not actually there to go to one of the stations. So, like, in my humble opinion, if you build an express and a passenger sees that it's going to go to those stations, I personally think maybe you should only be able to pick up passengers that are actually going to a station you're stopping at. I think that should be a thing. Or maybe you can have a checkbox where you can click that's called express, where then it does that, just my personal opinion, because that would help keep the people off the train that it would take up a seat that someone would otherwise want to have, who would want to ride the express. And I think that would also help you a bit with expresses in general. But I love the idea that I've seen many people talk about, of doing an express. But with the timetable, it kind of doesn't really work right now. And I'm sure they'll get some sort of fix out there. But at least structurally, if you're willing to let that go for now, it's okay. You can get a station stop every time and it'll always be fine. It'll work like a charm. You'll make lots of money. If you really are married to the idea of an express, then do what one of the guys in my Discord mentioned to me actually today, which I thought was great. Run an express right after a train that makes every station stop. So, like, for example, train 21 here. It's going to leave passengers in the station, but it's going to pick up a lot of passengers. Like, each one of these trains carries 445 people. And I could probably make it carry 500, but it's all good. But with that in mind, you got to think about it. If I schedule an express to start at 6:20, by the time you get to Alarga Junction, it would probably have caught up. It'd probably get slow. You'd have to account for that. You have to fine-tune the timetable a bit. But you could create a timetabled express right after, And that actually would probably work because there probably wouldn't be enough passengers wanting to go to all the little no-name stations because they would have probably already jumped on the first train. And so you'd be able to really focus on just delivering passengers to the big stations or however it is you wanted to set up your express. So I really think that's a really good workaround for now. That way you can still run the express, but at the same time, you're not leaving a bunch of passengers in the station. I'm definitely going to try it and see if I like that better than running an unscheduled train personally. But yeah, the timetable is beautiful. When you designate it as a passenger train, the locomotive will stay in the station until you tell it to depart or leave according to the timetable. And I would recommend using departure times instead of arrival times. I know Adam also recommended that. To be fair, I think real timetables also did that because you got to think about people. They don't want to know when a train gets there. They want to know when it leaves. And this is when the train leaves. Of course, except when you have an AD, that's arrival departure. But there's not even a passenger station there. That's just a siding because that's where they meet. That's kind of the midway point. But anyways, I didn't want to spend any time talking about how to do this rather because Adam's video did it, but I wanted to talk about a few things I've learned from it. And so those were kind of the big things. Quick summary again for the TLDR people. Give yourself a couple minutes on each leg more than what it recommends. For every station stop, add 2 to 3 minutes, period. Feel free to schedule as many trains as you want. Yes, please incorporate a Larka junction. It just adds a lot more passengers and money. Consider running an express after you run a non-express train. For now, at least. If they ever decide to change how that functions, then sure, you can, run an express first, which is how the prototype would because you don't want a fast train behind a slow train. But, for the sake of the game for now and its mechanics, obviously it's still in development. It's not perfect. So you'd run the express after a regularly scheduled train, 10 to 15 minutes after, or just run a second section after your peak times so you can pick up people. That's what I'm going to do for now. But I'm going to try a bit of both of it over time and see what happens, see what I like. But yeah, I hope, some of you guys find this helpful. Hopefully it was something you feel contributed value to you. I mean, if you have comments or questions, please feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer them. We've had a lot of good discussion on my Discord about Timetable and different people's experiences with it, and a lot of good insight there. So if you wanted to join that, you could join our Discord and you could ask questions to the chat, and that would be fine. But I'm going to go ahead and sign this one off. But it's been loads of fun. Thank you all for hanging out. And I think that at this point, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks again, everyone. We'll see you around.